What drives you?
It's important. It's important to help people understand how it works. Because like I say, when we get to that point where it's out of the bag that other exists and is credible and is a certain fact because the high priests have said it, then there needs to be enough people who have a good idea of how reality does work, that we don't go down a long dark rabbit hole of struggling with each other for control. So I think it's important to talk. So as long as there are people willing to listen, people who will learn and come away with it, then I'm in the game. So that's what drives me. It's just a matter of being available. That's why everything I do goes up on YouTube. And that's why my books are free on Google Books. For somebody who's trying to spread, an idea, that love is the answer, and that's important, because if we get to this point where it's a my God's bigger than your God kind of fight amongst who's going to claim other for their own, then we don't want to go back to that priesthood. We don't want to go back, what's that called? Dark Ages? We don't need to go back into that. And so hopefully there'll be enough people who will have a better picture that won't happen. So I think it's important. It's an important thing to get out. It's important that you guys have enough interest to listen, that you care about experiencing a larger reality, that you turn that to your own personal growth. All that's positive, because as you guys grow, you'll encourage other people to grow. Even if you never hold a meeting and never say anything, just by your example, just by your existence, you will create growth. So it's one of those things that kind of spreads. You just have to get it started. You just have to encourage it.
Can I ask you for some advice on how to bring more discipline?
Are we taking questions again?
Yeah, well, if we are, then you better get the mic.
Hi, can I ask for some advice on how to bring discipline into practice? I find this quite hard, quite grueling actually, to get to a place where I could possibly sort of get out and experience whatever's out there. And I'm definitely not natural. And the discipline, bringing the discipline into my life is just finding that extremely challenging.
There's a couple of points there. One, you are who you are. Do it your own way, because that's the only way it can be done. You may have to struggle longer because you don't have the discipline to do it quicker. Well, that's okay. Don't say that's a failure. Don't think of it as that's wrong. Think of it as that's just who I am. I have to be who I am. I'll get there in my own way, in my own time. And if you have that attitude, you'll find out that it's probably easier to find discipline if it's not, oh damn, I don't have discipline. I really need to have discipline. I'm not doing this right. You see, if you approach it that way, it'll be fingernails down the blackboard, you pushing it away. You'll probably never get discipline. If you approach it from the way that says, I'll do it as much as I feel like it, and then I'll quit. When it's time to stop and drink a beer, I'll do that. And I won't get too involved over it, and I'll have a candy bar and whatever, and I'll get there on my own time in my own way. That kind of gives you permission to do it differently. See, now suddenly you can not do that, and it's okay. Whereas before, I have to do it this way I don't like. Push back. See? So the best way to do it is just be yourself. Do it however it comes. Realize that it gets easier and easier the better you get at it. So you're putting off the time in which it will be easy by taking longer to get there. So that may or may not seem profitable to you. But in any case, you just do it the way you do it. And that's the way you do it. And that's the way you should do it, because you're you. And I think that's the way you need to approach everything. That's so much easier if you approach it that way. And it'll lead to where you need to go so much more quickly than if you try to make yourself be somebody other than who you are. That's a struggle that you'll lose. And then you'll feel bad about it. And then you'll feel guilty. And then, that'll get in the way of you actually doing it. And it actually prevents you from having success. So just be who you are.
Hello, if I could squeeze in one cheeky one.
One last one. Every time we make a shift in an important shift in our consciousness, or maybe every time we make a choice, do we create another universe?
No, it doesn't work like that. We don't create another universe. There is physicists trying very hard to understand all of these strange things, all these experiments that come out that aren't supposed to happen that way. Okay, one of their schemes for trying to make sense of it is the many worlds scheme. Well, in the many worlds scheme, everything that happens creates a new universe. Okay, so little things. If an electron goes from spin up to spin down, oops, new universe. There's lots of electrons. That means there's lots of universes. You see, this is not efficient as far as process goes. It's not an efficient process to generate a universe for every minute detail. Oh, I decided to scratch my head with my right hand instead of my left hand, new universe. So there has to be another one where I scratch that with my left hand, you see? Imagine all the the universes you have. You see, it's just not an efficient process. I mean, okay, theoretically you can do that, and you can kind of create a reality frame that sort of works to answer some of the problems, but it's ridiculous. You see, why do that? It's so much more in a virtual reality. That would be, it would take infinite bits, right? And infinite memory and infinite processing power, and you're going to have infinite universes. Well, they're not really going to be infinite, but they're going to be so large and so on. Why not do something that was more reasonable, more parsimonious, is a good computer science term, which means you don't use any more resources than you need to get the job done. Okay, so that's why we have a statistical reality, a probabilistic reality, rather than an objective reality. The reason it's probabilistic is because that is done in far fewer cycles. See, in a virtual reality, if we don't need the data stream, it doesn't have to be computed. Okay, so right now, what's going on out in the backyard? Okay, there's nobody out there looking at the backyard. It's a cold, rainy night. Backyard doesn't have any observers. Who does the larger conscious system have to send that data to? Nobody. Doesn't send it. Okay, when you're playing World of Warcraft and you turn the corner and you look this way, the mountains and trees and buildings behind you aren't given to you. They're only given to the people looking at them. Well, that's a great savings. Okay? If you had to track around all the little particles so you know where they were, this electron's over there, now it's over there, you had to trace all the little particles around so you could say where they would be, that would take a huge amount of calculation. You don't need to do that. Particles are probability distributions, you see. We found that out in the double slit experiment. But that's why they're probability distributions, because of a kind of a parsimony of computer power. You just know where they probably are. And for a lot of them, you have no idea where they probably are. You don't care. They're just the free electrons that are out there somewhere. You see, it's just a model. It doesn't matter. Electrons don't really exist anyway. You see, there's just probability. So it's that thing. So you don't need every particle. You don't need to trace it. You don't need to do anything. But when somebody takes a measurement of where that particle is, now you have to produce a particle there. If there's, whether there's one there or not, you have to produce it. Well, that's what's called the measurement problem. That's what they find in quantum mechanics. So when somebody makes the measurement and says, a particle went through this slit, well, then sure enough, you get a particle, and it goes through that slit and travels in a straight line, just like Newton said, until it hits the screen in the back, and you get a little pile of dots there right behind that slit. You see, because somebody measured it, and the act of getting the data, it's not really the act of measurement, except indirectly. It's the act of the data from that measurement comes into this reality frame, means that they're a particle now, and its trajectory is being followed. But otherwise, it probably is just probability. So only when we're measuring and looking does it have to do that. You see, that really reduces the crunch power tremendously. You only have to produce data for those people that need it, those animals that need it. whatever else needs. Everything else is probability. And as long as there's no inconsistencies created in the gameplay, then that's all you have to compute. Nothing more than that. So that's why we don't have multiple universes. Too much trouble, too many bits, too much calculation, and it's not that that's necessarily wrong. It's just improbable because it's too wasteful. Why would a system be that wasteful? Even if the system had the resources. There's no point in it. You do a statistical model and then you bring that into this reality frame whenever you need to. It's just probability. Okay, so that makes everything so much simpler, easier to compute. That's kind of the reason for the probable virtual reality, is that it's just better science. You were going to build the structure to do it, that's the way you build it. You wouldn't build a detailed model. When you're in it's like everybody makes shortcuts when they model. If you're in the World of Warcraft, they don't plant every little blade of grass. There's just sort of grass. And it's just little green things in there. They're everywhere. They're copied, pasted. It's a shortcut because nobody really cares about every blade of grass, right? So you take the shortcuts. You don't compute anything that you don't have to. So that's just normal way you approach a computer problem.
I'd be very interested in your reflections on the balance between being like the witness, the student, the visitor in this reality as well as in the other realities we visit, and then being the co-creator or being proactive in manifesting like evolution or new reality, like that balance between being receptive and proactive.
You'd like just, I don't know. I make life simple. Just the advice I gave him, I take myself. It's the same way. I just am how I am. And I gave up a long time ago trying to be anyway in particular. And I found out that control, we think that we control our environment and what we're doing and how we're acting. And I'm being the helper now, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And we do things purposely. And we kind of have this plan and we work to the plan. And I found that all of that turned out mostly to be illusionary. We don't really control anything but ourselves. We imagine we control all sorts of things, but we don't really control anything but ourselves. And I found out something very surprising, and that is when you give up control, when you stop trying to make things come out the way you'd like them to come out or be the way you think they should be, and just let them be and interact with them as they are, when you give up all sense of control, everything seems to just fall out exactly the way it should. You see, when you're trying to control it, nothing seems to go exactly the way it should. You're always struggling. It's always like putting too many clothes in a suitcase. One of them sticking out this side, so you open the suitcase and it'll stick out, something else pops out the other side. You can't ever seem to get it all inside at the same time. And it's frustrating because, if I could just get this last shirt to go in there, I'd be done. And when you do, something else pops out, and it just is never-ending frustration and struggle. And that's the way most people's lives are. Never-ending frustration and struggle. They can never quite get it all together or get it right. And they just got this fixed, and now their kids are giving them a problem. They just got that fixed, and now the boss is giving them a problem. And life is like that. But if you stop fixing things, and you say it just is, and I am, and you interact with caring, with love, all your interactions are love-based, and then after that, that's all you can do. You've optimized your input if it's love-based. However the chips fall after that is just however the chips fall after that, and you deal with it as it happens. So it's that sort of thing. So I found out that when you gave up control and had absolutely tried to control nothing, everything started to work right. And you didn't need any control because all the things were happening just the way they should happen. And part of that is because you're angst in trying to force control on things tends to be the angst that pushes things apart and away from your control. Again, you create your own reality. And the things that you obsess over and keep thinking about and putting energy to are all the problem things. You hardly obsess about the things that feel good. They just feel good and you like it and you go on. But the things that are a problem, you think about, and you keep feeding the problem. That's partly why it's always so frustrating. You seem to create these problems. Also, the larger consciousness system sees you stressing and it's all ego and it's fear and that. So the feedback is, things don't work right. The feedback is like, if you don't change the way you are, you're going to keep getting the same old stuff, over and over again. You don't like your life, you think it's suboptimal, then do something, or don't do something. But you need to change what you're doing. So that's the larger conscious system will constantly put obstacles in your way, just as a lesson. If you could act badly and everything work out perfectly, that wouldn't be a good lesson. That would nudge you to act badly. So when you act badly, it doesn't work. That's the way the system is rigged against you. As long as you're trying to force the system to your will, the system will squeeze out from under your control and frustrate you. Once you stop asking it to conform to your will, it doesn't mind conforming to your will. Maybe you even deserve it to conform to your will. Or your will conforms to it. You really can't tell the difference. They seem the same from that view. So I'm not sure how to answer your question, but I don't really see myself in any of those roles. I don't see myself in any role. As you went through the list of roles, I can see, well, sometimes I act like that and sometimes I don't, but mostly it's just circumstance, not on purpose, or not because I'm trying to be those roles. So I kind of am what I am and do what I do, and the chips fall where they may, and if that's helpful, I'm pleased. If it's not helpful, then I'll try to change and do better. Find out why it didn't work so well and figure a way to do it better next time. So learning's it's an iterative process. It's not you only get one chance. You get all the chances that you can, all the chances that you can use to get it right. Endless number of chances to get it right. And the getting it right isn't just the big stuff that shows, it's every detail. You can't go home and holler at the kids and kick your dog and then, go to work or go meet your friends and you're a saint. That doesn't work. It's all the little stuff too. So it's not just keep your eye on the big, the big things. Every detail of your life has to be consistent. And if it isn't, you're just fooling yourself, and that will gnaw at you and bring you down as well. So that's the thing. If you don't like your life, if you think your life is suboptimal, well, it's probably because you're creating a suboptimal life because you have a suboptimal attitude that is pushing on fear and ego and belief instead of love. And when you learn to let that go, then life gets good. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
thank you.
That's kind of the way I approach things. Yes, well, microphone, recorder, gentleman here.
I would just like to ask something which might be related to what you just said. I'm trying to figure out my attitude about OBE, because I was sort of pushed into this. When I was like 20, my mother died, and I was really connected to her. And then shortly after she died, I was going to sleep, and she was talking to me, and she was telling me basically, come with me, I'll show you how things really are. And it took my hand, and I was going down this tunnel, and it was just spiraling, and I really got scared. And then phone would ring, and telephone company couldn't find, what's wrong. And then maybe after a couple of months, I had the experience when I was going to bed again, and I was sharing bedroom with my brother. and then I was lying like here, and he was there, and then suddenly I was in the other corner, and I was listening to myself talking, just chatting, and then I was hearing him as well, and then it was going on for a couple of minutes, and I freaked out. And then over the years, these things were happening, and I was always, backing off. So last maybe 10 years, I'm trying to, learn how to do it, at will, consciously, and I'm not succeeding very much. I had some sort of partial success. So I'm trying to figure out what sort of game I'm playing with myself. What's the, and also what you said about the system. It can sort of play games to actually send you messages, and they can take any form. So what do you think about what I just said?
A lot of people have similar experiences to yours. It's not that uncommon. And a couple of things could be happening, and often there's not just one way that something could work out, but it could have been that your mother did come to you, that it was that entity, and she thought that she was aware, obviously, of the closeness of the two of you, and she knew that you would be distressed. So she came to you to put you more at ease, that she was okay. Not only that, I'll take you and show you how it works. Everything's fine. And it was probably out of an impulse to make you feel better, console you, that you knew everything was all right. Possibility number one. Possibility number two was that the larger consciousness system said, this guy's distressed. This would be good for him. He needs, this relief and some closure there with the mother, and sense that she's okay and that kind of thing, and it would be good for his future learning. It'll open his mind to more possibilities. It would be a good experience to have, and that the larger consciousness system gave you that because it thought it was positive in your growth path. And it could have been the larger consciousness system that did other things, that made the phone ring. These are things like that won't let you forget that reality seems to be bigger than just this physical thing. And every time maybe you think you're about ready to get that out and forget about it, something would happen to remind you, oh, it's really bigger than you think. You ought to pay attention to this. So it was just a nudge, kind of a needling, if you will, to get you to move on this path. Why would that happen? Why you? Why would they pick that kind of thing for you? Probably because you have been here and done that before. Probably because it's a matter of things that you are more familiar with than you think. And those people who come back who have evolved a great deal already, they come here, they still have to start from the beginning, but they start with the same quality of consciousness that they've earned over all their incarnations. And sometimes they're nudged along to help them kind of see things more quickly. So things like that will happen to them. They'll get, visions. They'll get information. They'll hear voices. They'll tell them things. And this is just kind of nudging you. You remember you've been there before. You've kind of done this, and it tries to nudge them to get up and go on past where they were before, to get through this. So that happens to people. I'm just saying things that might have happened. You're a unique case, and you can't everybody's individual, and it happens for those own individual reasons. But I would guess that particularly because they continued on, that it was the larger consciousness system thinking that this would be good for your overall growth. And the fact that you ended up here with an interest in finding out would say that it is, because people don't end up here with an interest in finding out who are just beginners. The people who end up here are people who are ready for this step. And why you're blocking it is probably just these things we're talking about. You're still not yet clear whether this is real or not. You don't want to get it. You don't want it fake if it's not real. You don't want to make it up. And because you're very sensitive about making it up and making sure that it's real and not just your imagination, particularly because it would cast back on this experience with your mother being real or just made up. So it's important to you that it not trick you into thinking something was real that was not real. And because of that, you're very vigilant. Because of that, you probably overanalyze, overlook at it, judge it, instead of just letting it happen. And because you do, then it doesn't happen. So that would be my guess. You just need to let it go and say, well, it is whatever it is, and I'll sort it out later. But I'll just have the experience and see what happens. And eventually, I'll probably learn how real it is, because it'll show me. Eventually, things will happen and show me how real it is. So, and it will, because if the larger consciousness system's taking this much trouble with you, it's not just going to leave you alone. It's going to continue to take trouble with you. So if you give it a chance, it'll probably show you more stuff. If you kind of refuse it, which means, I don't want to go there because I'm not sure about it, then you're a harder case then. You'd have to either try harder or wait until you're a little more ready. So that's maybe what's going on. So I suspect that if you just kind of say, okay, I'm just going to experience it, whatever it is, wherever it comes from. And later, after I have a lot of experience with it, I'll be able to judge how real it is. Then you will probably get some experiences that will convince you it's real, because then you're open to it. Things that you couldn't know otherwise. Things you'll find out. It'll be some kind of a evidential experience for you. But you may just have to be open to it for a while before that comes. But I suspect it will. The system's been up this much trouble on your account, it'll probably keep right on trying, because it obviously thinks you're worth it, because of where you've been, what you've done, and who you are, and the kind of person you are, and everything else. It believes that you're, ready to experience more, so it's nudging. It's giving you these little bumps. And you're probably a left brain person that wants logical process. And if you don't get a logical process, then you can't accept it.
I'm an engineer, sorry.
Yeah, engineer. So that's, I said that these are people with logical process that, basically get into those particular traps. But that's probably what's happening. And the right brain person, of course, wouldn't ask those questions and wouldn't need that. They work at it more holistically. They kind of get big picture stuff, intuition. Whereas a good engineer doesn't believe his intuition, he only believes his math. If his engineering tells him it'll work, it'll work. He can't go on intuition. The bridge won't fall down. Oh, I got a gut feeling this bridge is going to hold up. That doesn't work, right? That's trained out of you. You let that intuition go. You have to, I want to see the facts on the board. So that's your training, and it's hard to do anything other than that, because that's how you and your mind define, reality, and whether or not it's good and it's honest stuff, or whether it's just make-believe. Well, now you have to open those gates a little bit and say, well, I can't really tell whether it's make-believe or not until I get more experience. So I'm just going to be open to the experience, and I'll defer the judgment till later. But I will make the judgment later. I just make it later after I get more stuff, and you'll see it'll work itself out probably pretty quickly. Things will just come and go, just like Todd was saying. Oh, I want to find out about those conspiracies, and then it happens, and within weeks, conspiracies are irrelevant. It just went away. But it was the thing that got him there. You see, and this thing with your mother and other things, that's what got you here. And now when you just let it go, all the things that aren't really relevant will just go away, and you'll get your evidence that you need. That's generally the way it works. I mean, I don't know how it's going to work, but that's typically the way it works. Yeah.
So the way that I understand it is that we have a soul, and so I'm here, and there has to be some connection between me and my soul. So let's just call that, let's say, your higher self. And I'm interested in what your opinion is on how many higher selves a soul might have in a system at any one time. So how many, let's say, humans my soul might have running in this human system right now. And also, if I'm an aspect of my soul and I have the higher self that connects me to that soul, and let's just say, for the sake of it, that let's just say I've had 1,000 lives that have brought me here to this life, I'm wondering what's the one common thread of that aspect of my personality, of my soul, or what aspect of your soul, you know, whoever I am through those 1,000 lives that I'm embodying throughout. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I understand your question, or your series of questions. I may forget them by the time I get there, but to begin with, you asked how many incarnations might be here at the same time, and was that it?
Yeah. How many higher selves? Or do you think the soul only ever has one higher self in the human system?
First of all, we have this hierarchy, the way we think of things. We have the larger conscious system, and then we have what some people call a higher self. Some people say it's an oversoul, whatever that is. And then beneath that, there's a thing that, at least in my book, I call a free will awareness unit, which is actually the part of that higher self that's in this reality. And we have this hierarchy, right? It's just a metaphor. It's not real. It's not really that you have this oversoul, and this oversoul, you know, lives in a little house, you know, in heaven sort of thing, and it's there all the time, and then it breaks off these chunks, and they have these experiences. We talk about it that way because that allows us to communicate these things, but that's not literal. It's not really literal. It's not really like that. You, your oversoul, your guides, all of that stuff are just pieces of the larger consciousness system. You have a larger consciousness system, and when it's time for you to have this incarnation, because this is a situation in which, you know, you can learn and you're ready to learn and so on, then you just, you know, my metaphor, you know, you just get bubbled up out of the consciousness system and put there, and, you know, you go, girl. After that, you know, you just do whatever you do. We don't have to really go through all these mechanisms, but you do collect. You do collect, you know, your quality points, if you will. You learn, you grow, you lower your entropy. So if you learn your lessons and become more toward love, then the next time you start there, and you learn more the next time you start there. So it's cumulative. So when we think of it being a cumulative learning process, we start thinking of oversouls or higher selves that is the accumulator, right? And then when we start thinking in terms of something other than us, this higher whatever, that gives us kind of a place. It's a metaphor that allows us to kind of name, if you will, that higher aspect of us that's accumulating our quality points as we learn and grow in this life. So all of those things are just metaphors. That's not really a structure. You don't have these oversouls that, you know, float around on this level doing these things, and they go to oversoul school and, you know, eat oversoul food, and, you know, they have their own little life there. It's not like that. And then every once in a while they make a projection and they do that. That is trying to build a structure that's a copy of kind of our physical reality, where things are separate. Okay, here we are, this oversoul or this higher self, it's separate, and it does this, and this is its functions, and then it belongs here, and it does that. These are all things we make up. These are models, like the chakras, that we make up so that we can talk about it and understand it. Basically, it's a larger consciousness system. You are a packet of information in that larger conscious system, which is all of your lifetimes, everything that makes you. That's what you're calling your oversoul. It's all of the stuff that makes you. And then when it's time for you to, you know, to have another character at this level, because it's going to speed up your evolution, you get back into this game because it's your free will choice to do that, then that data packet basically that describes you, you know, gets a little subset of that, puts it in the trainer so that it gets a data stream that is in, you know, that is consistent with the rule set of your avatar, and then you're in the game. You see? So when you're not in the game, when you're not in any virtual reality, you're just data. You're back in that position. You can't do anything but either communicate or not. You know, you really don't have any choices other than that. So your free will is down to almost nothing. Your world kind of shrinks to almost nothing. You're not really doing a whole lot there, because being connected in a chat room to billions of other people, or even to tens or ones, or trading data, is really hard to learn a lot, because nothing is direct. It's like everything is indirect. So it's hard to get any traction there. It's hard to get any feedback that means anything. So basically, you're only really up and going and viable and acting when you're in a virtual reality, whether it's in a out-of-body reality or a dream reality or this reality. Now you're in gear and you're working. And all that information, I tend to not complicate things with the structure of oversouls and higher selves and things. It's just say, you know, you're a piece of the larger conscious system. And the larger consciousness system plays its assets as it sees fit. And there really isn't any complexity to it. Now that's just a real sloppy big metaphor, you see, that kind of all gets thrown into one drawer. It's easier for us to talk about it in terms of higher selves, souls, oversouls, and all that structure is metaphor. And the reason I say it's metaphor is that the details of how the system works aren't really ours to know. You see, here's the funny thing about it, is that you get data. You see the data and you get to interpret it. You never get to see the source of the data. See, there's a difference between the data and the source of the data. They're two different things. You only get the data. The source of the data is not a thing that you can grasp. It's invisible to you and always will be invisible to you, because all you can get is data. That's the nature of you as a consciousness. You just get data and you interact with that data and you interpret that data, and then you act and make decisions according to the data that you get. The source of the data is just the source of the data. So in order to avoid complication and make it more, you know, there's a thing called Occam's razor that says if you're making up models, you should make them as simple as possible, because you fool yourself with complexity when you don't really know what you're talking about. So that's my position. You know, I don't really know what I'm talking about, so I make a simple model that just says the larger consciousness system sends you the data when you're ready for it. And then that simplifies it. But you know, we could do the same with the chakras. We don't really need to have all that process. We could just, you know, talk in terms of more global things. But most people would get lost if we did. So higher self is a good, you know, it's a good metaphor, and it does help us learn. So I'd say, how many higher selves do you have? Well, as many as it takes. You know, whatever makes sense to you. And this is the thing about models. A model isn't that a model is right or wrong so much. This is a model useful or not. Okay, for years we modeled an atom as a hard, positive center with little electrons whizzing around in orbits, right? That's how we modeled an atom. That's what most people still think of an atom is. And then we find out that's not true. It's not like that at all. There aren't little BBs running around the basketball, you know. It's a cloud. It's a probability distribution of charge, and so is the nucleus. You know, it's all probability. That's what we found out. So it's not that model of the BB going around the basketball is a bad model. It's just a model. It's a metaphor. And it's very helpful at a certain level of understanding. So if you're trying to teach your 8-year-old or your 10-year-old about an atom, it's a good model, you know. Tell them that. You tell them that it's a probability cloud, and they don't know what to do with that. They can't process the data, you see. So your model of higher selves, if it helps you understand the way things work, then use it. It doesn't matter that, you know, I say, well, let's just say there's just a larger conscious system and dispense with the details or dispense with the chakras. The chakras help you. If that helps you slice and dice the information so that it's more usable for you, it's a good model for you. The thing to be cautious about is don't get stuck in a model. never believe the model. Realize your model is always a model. See, and it's not really something fundamental. It's just your model. Then you won't be surprised like the physicists were when electrons turn out to be probability distributions. And oh my God, what does that mean? You know, suddenly their world got turned upside down because they forgot that that electron was just a model. It wasn't a truth. So use these models. You know, so I don't want people to think that I'm saying these models are bogus. You know, you shouldn't use these models. Use the models if they make sense. If they confuse you, if you start getting, well, where does that stop? I got a higher self, and then does the higher self has a higher self, and how does that plug in to, you know, the master self? And if it starts to get confusing, it's not a good model anymore. Back off and say, that really doesn't matter. You know, what is it I'm trying to get out of this? And if it's just to help you understand how things plug together functionally, see, our models tend to be functional models. The higher self serves as a function. It's the accumulator of the experience. Okay? We need that function in our understanding. So we make that, call it a higher self, because it's hard for us to say, well, it just accumulates in a hard drive somewhere. You know, it accumulates in some file, someplace in this giant data machine. Well, that feels cold and prickly. You know, I got this cute little higher self and it loves me. You know, that's softer, that's warmer, that works better. So we use, you know, we use the things that work for us. So I'm not saying the thing about higher self isn't a good model, but when it stops working for you and it starts to confuse you, just let it go and realize it's just a model. And models and metaphors can only be stretched so far. You know, metaphors aren't universal. You don't have a metaphor that serves all purposes. Metaphors are particular, and you start to push that metaphor past where it can go, you run into all kinds of logical inconsistencies and difficulties. And things like, you know, how many higher selves are there is where you're pushing a good metaphor to a place where it doesn't make sense. So you ask a question because it doesn't really make sense. But that's why you're just pushing the metaphor too far. So just let it come back and let it be what it is. And say it really doesn't have to be anything more than just what it is. And you don't have to tie all the pieces together and make it into a nice little package, as long as it works for you. Now, if you happen to be an engineer, then you have to tie all those neat little ends together in a package, otherwise you're very unhappy. You know, because that's the way your world is ordered. And then you need more models. And you frustrate yourself to death because you take these metaphors and you always will find a place where it doesn't quite work and it doesn't make sense. And it's because you're pressing metaphors. You know, these things aren't real anyway, just like the electrons aren't real. You know, there is really no higher self or no oversoul. There's just the larger consciousness system. It's just this big information system. You're part of it. You're a packet of information. And when it suits that system, you get played. Now, don't think now that the system is like your great-great-grandfather. You know, the little old man, a long white beard, you know, who playing with his pet people. Oh, now I'm going to play this one, you know. It's not like that either. This is just a system that's evolved. It's evolved to be efficient. It doesn't waste resources, you know, like we taught. It does what it does. It's evolving. It's trying to form content. It's trying not to dissolve into randomness. It's created some strategies for doing that, and it just does it. It's an intelligent system, obviously. It's a conscious system. It knows what it's doing. But we can't say, well, it's just sort of like me, but better. You know, it's kind of this superhuman, you know, top monkey, right, who, you know, has everything planned out. Don't go there. That's just an anthropomorphic model, making it a better, bigger, faster, neater human. You know, it's not like that. This is a system that we're not going to understand. This is on a scale and of a size that doesn't really compute too well in our experience base. That's why I try not to go into a lot of details like that, because I know that I'm making them up to suit my own little sliver of you know, limited imagination that they probably aren't right. They're just models. And when I get too far out in front of where I can actually see, you know, I try to just generalize and not be too specific. So models are good but limited, and any metaphor can be pushed past the point where it's useful. And don't, you know, fret over this metaphor doesn't work everywhere. because then that means that, then it's not true. Because if it were true, if all the pieces would fit in everywhere, well, unfortunately, that's right, it's not true. It's just a metaphor. The truth is elusive because we never get to see the source of the data. We don't know how the larger conscious system works. We don't know its operating system or why and how it necessarily does what it does, how it decides to play you and play me and do this now for its own reasons. It's just a large, natural, complex, self-changing, aware system that's evolving, and we're a part of it. We're the part that goes round and round and round trying to increase the evolution. In an information system, you increase the evolution by making information, not being random. Becoming love, that optimizes the system. It's more cooperative. You can reduce entropy faster if you're love, you see. So I kind of think of, you need to know your own limitations, I guess, but you don't go beyond where it makes sense. Does that help? I know I didn't really answer your question directly, but.
And do you think it's possible that, because you've talked a lot about, let's say, love and fear, which is a duality structure, like polarized, and you seem to be saying that the purpose is to get to a space where, we like love is the optimum, but again, that seems to become from a either or, like, so there's only two. So do you think it's possible that there are structures where there is a third, or maybe a fourth?
Well, love and fear, of course, can branch into all sorts of things. Like fear branches into, ego, belief, wants, needs, desires, control, power. You make a real long list of the things that are fear-based, and you can also the things that are love-based. You can make long lists. That seems to be the basic dichotomy, because that's evolution, de-evolution. Okay. Now, I'm not sure if you're evolving that you have more than two choices. You can evolve and you can de-evolve. Now, that evolution may take you any number of 1,000 or 1,000,000 branches, and that de-evolution may take you any number of 1,000,000 branches, but it's just evolution or de-evolution, which is toward love, toward fear. And I think the process is just kind of an either or. Of course, you can be in any mixed state between the two. All of us are. All of us have our fear. We have some love. We have all different pieces of it. So you can be in any one of these zillion states of in-betweenness. And those are, I think, probably more than could be enumerated. At least we couldn't enumerate them all. But I don't know that there's a third path within evolution. Evolve, de-evolve. Maybe the third path is stay the same. There is a path where you don't do any, and there is a path, these are theoretical paths, they're just not stable. I didn't mention them, but one is stay the same. Okay, you neither evolve or de-evolve, you always stay the same, that way you live forever, right? That'd be a strategy that the system could take. Another one is you oscillate, you evolve a little, de-evolve a little, so that the average always stays about the same. That would be another path. Neither of those states are stable. If you take a large, complex, self-changing system, in the end, if you wait long enough, it'll either evolve or de-evolve. It can't just keep wobbling around in the middle, because most of these things are, in a sense, chaotic. In other words, little moves, little things grow to become big things. And you're doing this, and eventually you'll hit a dip that'll just hit at just the wrong time with just the wrong things together, then it'll go on down more. And then that will be such that it's more hard, it's more difficult to recover, and then the wrong things happen. And it may be a very unusual sequence that would take you there, but if you have forever, eventually you'll hit the sequence and you'll terminate, or you'll go up. So I think it's unstable to think that it can just meander around and not ever actually get anywhere. I think over the long term, it'll have to either evolve or de-evolve. Those other two states are staying the same or wobbling across the middle, keeping a constant average. Though they exist, I don't think they're practical. Of course, I may be wrong too. I'm just making all this up.
Thank you.
Could it diverge? Could it spin into two paths?
Well, in a sense, evolution does do that. There's the positive part and the negative part. So you might say that diverged. Those people who de-evolve are diverging one way, and people evolving are diverging the other. So one might say that, but it's still one system, and we can't logically get beyond just this one system because we can't get out of it because we're of it. We're it. We can't see that far. If we could, we maybe know what was outside the boundary, that finite boundary. But that's one of our limitations on knowledge. We just don't know. So if there's something diverging out there, hard to say. In my book, I joke about it. I say, well, maybe we're just one. I call this larger conscious system Om, just because I thought that would be cute. Om. So anyway, and I made up something to go with the acronym. So anyhow, but I talk about Om, and Om's just this larger conscious system, and I said perhaps it's just one cell, of a larger thing, and there may be billions and billions of cells that are like Om, and all those cells may be together and Omosaurus, And anyway, I got a little carried away there, but it was all in good fun. So you have to realize when you're past the limit of your knowledge, and it's just conjecture, and that's not a failure. There's a logical limit on what you can know. You can't get outside of your system to look back at it and look at other things outside your system because you're made of consciousness. You can't get out of your consciousness system. Now, you can explore all over this system as consciousness. You can get out of your virtual reality. That's what you guys are doing. You can get out of your virtual reality. You can go to a dozen other virtual realities. Some of them, like this one, very tight rule sets. Some of them more like the out-of-body and dream states. There's lots of virtual realities you can go to, and you can visit them all. You can stay with them all, make friends, have a wife or a husband in every port, right? You can get around if you want to, because you're consciousness. So you can get all over consciousness just with your intent. It's your system, your playground to play in, but you can't get outside of it because you are consciousness. You're a part of this consciousness, larger consciousness system, and how do you get out of yourself? So it's hard to do. So it's not a failure that we don't know, it's just we can't know. It's like that was the one thing that my son really got upset about. He read my books. He was 17. I twisted his arm. He read the books. I homeschooled my kids, so I was able to put my book on their reading list. And then he read the book, and the one thing that got him was that he says, I really didn't like. Of course, he's like 17 now, and when you're 17, you know everything. And he really didn't like it. Not only do I not know everything, but I can't know everything. And he says that was like the biggest problem he had with the whole book is this statement that said there's a limitation to knowledge and you can't know everything. And that was like a bummer because he figured, well, technology will go on forever and pretty soon, there will be no end and nothing will be impossible that we can't do and so on. And that's not true. There are limits to knowledge.
Tom, you seem to be saying that.
Wait a minute, let's record these brilliant words.
You seem to be saying that consciousness, or the greater consciousness, is like all that is. But in order for that to be all that is, there must exist something that is not. In order for what is to exist, there has to be a what is not.
Well,
and surely what is not would have its own set of experiences.
Yeah, maybe. I would agree. See, I can tell you that the consciousness system is real, therefore finite. So if it's finite, it has boundaries. If it has boundaries, then there's something outside the boundary. It's as far as it goes. So what's outside the boundary is not what it is not that you're saying, and that what it is not may be a whole bunch of what it is not. That's the point, though. That's as far as it goes. Okay, we get to that point that it's real, so it has a boundary. It's a real system, evolving, doing real things. This is, this virtual reality is not random. It's not infinite. You can't have infinite systems. You can't get to infinite. Infinite is just an imaginary point. It's not a real point. So you never get to a point and say, oh, this is an infinite number of whatever. It's impossible. There is no infinite number. See, it isn't real.
Could you have infinite cycles?
Huh? Infinite cycles, not unless you have infinite time. You see, you never get there. There is no infinite time. It's the same way. If there was infinite time, you just have to wait a little longer, and there'd be more time than infinite time. So then that really wasn't infinite time after all. You see? So when you get to these things, infinity isn't real. It's just in the limit. You go to infinity in the limit, which means it's an imaginary place that you go, this highest number. You get closer and closer and closer to it, but you never actually can get there. It's the same with infinite cycles. You get a lot of cycles, but no matter how many you get, you can always turn that crank one more time, right? You get one more. So it doesn't go away. It's not an achievable point. It's not real. That's what I mean by real. Real stuff doesn't get infinite. Real stuff has to be finite. Finite stuff has to have boundaries. Boundaries mean there might be something else. How do we know? Maybe on the other side of the boundary there's nothing, whatever that means. Don't know. All we can say is that it's real, it has a boundary, and we don't really have a clue what might be on the other side. And most likely we will never have a clue because it's logically inconsistent with us being consciousness.
And then are you saying that we're going to run out of time as well because time is finite? So not...
No. Well, not with a digital system. You see, with a digital system, what happens with time, and I don't know that we're going to, consciousness being finite doesn't mean you run out of it. It's continued. It's open-ended. Evolution is an open-ended thing. Evolution doesn't quit. It's not like, well, now we're humans. We're the cream of existence, and that's the end of it. It still goes on. So open-ended evolution never quits. Wherever it is, it just becomes whatever else is next. You see, so no, I don't think it doesn't run out of time, doesn't run out of resources. It's digital. If it ever uses up all of its bits, it can just find out which bits are least productive, erase them, got a whole bunch of new bits to use. Okay? It doesn't, it's possible that it could start to get asymptotic because it was running out of memory or something else because it's finite. Well, it could just upload maybe to that Allosaurus and start over. Who knows how that works, you see? Who knows how that works? We just don't know at that point. So there's no way to make a prediction that it's going to run out of anything. It's just open-ended. It just is. And you kind of have to live gracefully with that uncertainty, because there isn't anything we can do about it. And that's the thing that irks people. They don't like living with that uncertainty. It's like, I want to know, damn it.
In the world of Warcraft, there was this wise wizard who said, though your oversoul is immortal, open brackets, disregarding a few rare exceptions. Would you care to comment on the few rare exceptions?
Yes, there are a few exceptions. I have seen entities be destroyed, but I don't know exactly what destroyed means. What I know is that there are rules in this rule set, and in this big thing, this big consciousness system, there are rules. There are rules within our local virtual reality, and there are penalties for disobeying the rules. Obviously, if you have rules and nobody pays any attention to them, then the rule is dysfunctional. You don't need the rule. The rule is there for a purpose, and any system that's complex and has to produce something consistent and coherent like a virtual reality needs to have rules, and rules need to be obeyed, or you have to use them, or the system falls apart. Where there are no rules, we call that anarchy, and where we have anarchy, we don't have low entropy, we have high entropy. That's a lot of randomness. So if you are a disobeyer of the rules to a serious enough extent and often enough whatever, I have been there when entities were deleted, if you will, from the system. And basically what I noticed is that they disappeared. And how that works, I don't know. But now in a digital reality, I can see they can just be literally deleted, right? If this is a digital reality and you're a packet of data, it's not that hard to delete a folder or a file or whatever. It's just gone. It means the bits are returned to randomness to be used for some other purpose. They're no longer engaged anymore. In that case, it's permanent. Okay, now maybe deleted meant they just disappeared, but the data file wasn't erased. Maybe they'll try it again to implement that some other time under differing conditions to see if they can't, coax it back in a more positive direction. In other words, more like reclamation than deletion. The system may be likely to do that, or they may say, look, these bits are just not functioning well. We just delete, we'll portion these bits to something else. So it's hard to say. I don't know really what that means. But it happens occasionally, but it's very rare. And anybody who might worried about being a laggard and getting deleted, that's, very unlikely to happen. Any entity who in any way is going through the motions of making an effort, even if it's a poor effort, even if their effort has caused a lot of de-evolution, if there's any significant potential that could turn around, that could then be into a working entity, there'd be no reason. It would be counterproductive to delete anything that had potential. So it's only something that is deemed to have no potential. So you can mess up and mess up and mess up again. You can be a homicidal maniac, you can do all kinds of terrible things, but you still have potential. That was just that lifetime. It's not necessarily all you're capable of producing. So under different circumstances and maybe a more protected environment where you didn't quite have so much power or whatever, it might, you'd get a little better, work, it would work back. And I think that's the way it usually does. So you have to be a very hard case with no effort whatsoever for a very long time, making very grievous, going out of your way to create trouble before I think you would ever be deleted or taken out of continual, repetition.
When you last met someone who had less noise than yourself, what did you talk about?
Oh, I've met those. The question was when I met.
When you last encountered someone who had less noise than yourself, in your opinion, what did you discuss? If it was not too personal.
Well, when you live the way I do, as I've described, I generally don't go out and seek much. What I need comes to me, and it just tends to work out that way. Again, when you stop trying to control the environment and get things come as you need them. So it's kind of a just-in-time service that just when you need something, it shows up. So I don't really go out and try to gather information. At one time, I did, because I could find information and it was valuable to me, and I went out, but I haven't done that for a very long time. It just, if I need to know, somebody will tell me. It's that sort of thing. And if nobody tells me, then I get by the best I can, and all of that's okay. So I kind of leave it up to the larger conscious system to do with me what it will. And if I'm creating something that's good, that it likes, then it'll support that creation. If I'm doing something that isn't helpful, then it won't support that creation. But in either way, I can't do anything other than be who I am. Same advice I gave this other fellow. He gave up, right? He got too tired. But Steve, I guess, I gave Steve that, you try to interact with love and caring. You try to be as helpful as you can. And after that, chips fall where they may. So if I did just tonight run into an entity that I thought knew a whole lot more than I did, I probably wouldn't say anything. I'd just listen. Because if that happened, that entity was, I meet him for a purpose. It's not that I just happened to bump into him on a busy street and it was accidental. it would have been because that entity was there for a reason, because of something that I needed to know, or needed to learn, or needed to witness, or needed to have an experience with, and I'd just be open. So if it had something to say to me, I'd get it. I'd be open. I wouldn't be trying to carry on a conversation and be cluttering my mind with what I thought I should say. I'd just be open and see. And the experience would be whatever it would be. It might turn out to be nothing, or it might be something, but either way, it's okay. So see, that's an easy way to live, isn't it? See, all the hard decisions are gone. All you have to do is exist and be who you are. I mean, what could be simpler than that? It's a real easy way. And it works.
I'd really like to ask you